Iran breaking news today. US and Europe consider Iran sanctions following Israel strike. Following Iran's historic attack on Israel over the weekend, Western governments are considering more penalties. According to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, the goal is to degrade Iran's military capacity. The United States intends to put new sanctions on Iran in the near future. The head diplomat of the European Union, Josep Borrell, has stated that the bloc is contemplating stepping up sanctions. On Wednesday, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and British Foreign Secretary David Cameron met with Israeli President Isaac Herzog in Israel. According to Germany's envoy to Israel, Baerbock also had meetings with relatives of hostages detained by Hamas. Israeli military officials have been debating whether to launch an assault on Iran despite calls for restraint from foreign leaders. Following the drone and missile attack, which Tehran claimed was in response to an Israeli raid on an Iranian diplomatic post in Syria earlier this month, Iran's top officials issued a warning against retribution. American officials, according to State Department spokesman Matthew Miller, will present to Israel the results of a fresh investigation by the Washington Post into the vehicle murders of 6-year-old Hind Rajab and her family. On January 29, while Hind and her cousin Lane were pleading for aid, the Post discovered that Israeli armored vehicles were in the area near their car during the afternoon. They also heard gunfire. When the Post asked acoustic analyst Stephen Beck, who had worked for the FBI for over a decade, to review the recorded gunfire, Beck determined that the rate of firing was higher than that of an automatic AK pattern rifle, the weapon of choice for Hamas militants. He claimed the rate was more in line with that of weapons frequently supplied to Israeli military. Additionally, compared to an AK pattern rifle, Earshot discovered a higher rate of fire. Furthermore, the family's vehicle has sustained damage that is in line with rounds fired by Israeli tanks. These results go against what the Israeli Defense Forces have previously asserted, which claimed that no Israeli forces were in the region where Hind, her family, and the 2 paramedics dispatched to her rescue were slain. Miller announced at a news briefing on Tuesday, only hours after the probe was published in the Washington Post, that the State Department will take the information that is contained in that Washington Post story and go back to the government of Israel and ask them for further information. We immediately brought this up with the Israeli authorities as soon as we saw the news of her death. They informed us that they had investigated and discovered that there were no IDF forces in the vicinity when she died, Miller stated. I perused the essay in the Post. On the other hand, the Post has reached a different conclusion. 12 days after Hind and her cousin Lane notified emergency dispatchers that Israeli tanks were approaching, a car filled with bullets was discovered with Hind and 6 of her family members inside. No one ever got the 2 paramedics sent to rescue them. A direct-fire munition target was visible on the discovered car, according to the Post's investigation. The paramedics' bodies were nearly completely devoid of any trace. And terrible tragedy, something that never should have occurred and never should occur, was Miller's description of Hindo's death. The Post's investigation relied on a variety of sources, including satellite imaging, recordings made by dispatchers at the scene of the accident, photographs and videos taken shortly after the incident, interviews with 13 dispatchers, relatives, and rescue workers, the opinions of over a dozen specialists in the fields of military, satellites, munitions, and audio, and comments from the Israeli Defense Forces. Since the war in Gaza began, a new report by Human Rights Watch states that Israeli settlers have attacked, tortured, threatened to kill, and destroyed Palestinian homes and schools in the occupied West Bank. This wave of violence has entirely uprooted 7 villages and displaced people from 13 others. Human Rights Watch noted in its April 7 report that the Israeli Defense Forces did not answer questions supplied by the organization. The Washington Post likewise did not receive an instant response when they asked for comment. Human Rights Watch examined 5 of the 20 villages where Palestinians were forcibly relocated and found that every single individual had been forcibly removed. Israeli military were involved in the assaults on 3 of the towns and assisted settlers in blocking the road to a 4th, according to Bill Van Asveld, an associate director in the Children's Rights Division who was involved in the report's production. The study, which relies on interviews with 27 eyewitnesses and footage shot by locals, claims that none of the displaced Palestinians have been permitted to go back to their houses. The report states, as did earlier reports in Israeli media, that following the October 7 attack on southern Israel by Hamas, which killed approximately 1,200 people, the Israeli military mustered 5,500 settlers who were reservists from the Israeli army. Some of these settlers had criminal records of violence against Palestinians, and the Israeli military then assigned them guns and put them to West Bank regional defense battalions. Unlike previous attacks, several of the men who have targeted Palestinian villages since October 7 have brought assault firearms. According to Van Asveld, eyewitnesses frequently reported seeing guns similar to the M16. Despite sending 8,000 military rifles to Israel in 2023, the sale of over 20,000 assault rifles was postponed in December due to fears that they would end up in the hands of settlements, as reported by the Trace. According to the report, for cars carrying soldiers, some of whom people knew as settlers from past attacks, attacked the town of Wadi al-Sheikh on October 12, successfully expelling all 180 residents. According to the allegation, the troops threatened to shoot residents if they did not evacuate within an hour, took their phones, car keys, and IDs, beat people, and broke into tents where women and children were sheltering. They threw their possessions on the ground. According to one mother, one man in uniform kicked me in the back of my neck after soldiers raided her tent, pushed her and her children, and stole their phones. They threatened to kill you if they heard you return from the valley.